Very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Well, it is finally just under a week until the next Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister is announced. They'll be under an awful lot of pressure to act on day one, not least of all to tackle the cost of living crisis. We'll be speaking to our political correspondent, Tom Howard, about that in Westminster for the latest. It's exactly a year since the US also officially withdrew from Afghanistan, with concerns that the world is much less safe. Meanwhile, the UN claims that Afghan citizens are in survival mode 1 year on. We'll be showing you an exclusive report from our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Ukraine's counter-offensive has begun in the Kherson region, and it's well underway with multiple strikes in efforts to try and retake the city that fell to Russian forces all the way back in March. We're speaking to Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, an expert for the latest on that. And we'll be heading to Scotland for the latest on the bin crisis, where rubbish has been piling up for almost 2 weeks. What's it like in the city now? As always, do get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet me at GBNews. All that and so much more between now and 4 o'clock. But first, at the top of the hour, here's Rosie Wright with the very latest news headlines.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's just a couple of minutes past 3. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister says people will face tough months ahead due to the soaring cost of living. During a visit in Dorset today, Boris Johnson promised more announcements would come this week on energy security, including nuclear power. But he said it would be up to his successor, either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, to provide a further package of support.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week, and we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. But the Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard the full advice, which she won't have until and if she's appointed PM. The Labour Party says the delay's causing families unnecessary worry. The Labour chair, Annalise Dodds, told us that Liz Truss needs to act now.
Energy price rises, as you know, they're a big contributor to inflation. If we manage to stop that price rise, that price cap rise going through, then we would be reducing the rate of inflation. That would, for example, get the cost of government borrowing down as well. So it's really important that Truss actually listens to what Labour's calling for and stops flip-flopping about with all these different plans that she seems to be floating, actually gets a grip and says that she'll commit to Labour's plan.
Pubs and brewers across the UK are at risk of closure within months, they say, amid energy price hikes, in some cases of up to 300%. Well, industry bosses, 6 of the UK's biggest firms, have signed an open letter to the government asking for action to avoid irreversible damage to the sector. Some pub owners say they're now struggling to find suppliers who are even willing to power their venues. Well, the Chancellor is going to travel to the United States this week to try to find joint solutions for the cost of living. Nadhim Zahawi is going to meet with government officials and bankers in New York and Washington and DC. The Treasury says he's going to push for cooperation on energy security, tackling spiralling prices and economic growth. BT and Openreach workers are staging fresh strikes over pay as the summer of industrial unrest across the country continues. The Communication Workers Union says 40,000 of its members at BT Group are showing serious determination to get a decent wage rise. General Secretary of the Communications Workers Union in Lincolnshire and South York, Mark Pastorelli, says the government must get involved in negotiations.
Got strikes going on all over the country for different reasons. Well, it's for one reason. The reason is money. It's about the cost of living going up. What we need is the government to take action here. Yeah. We need their inputs, but they're not doing anything. I can't see them doing anything at the moment.
A man stabbed to death at the Notting Hill Carnival has been named as 21-year-old Tycho Nembhard. A murder inquiry is underway after the Bristol rapper, who performed under the stage name of Tico Stretch, was attacked in the Ladbroke Grove area last night. The Metropolitan Police made 209 arrests at the event over the bank holiday weekend, including 33 arrests for possessing an offensive weapon. Ukraine says it's taking back territory occupied by Russian forces in several areas of the front line after launching a counterattack. Ukrainian forces have launched an offensive near Kherson in the south of the country. The Kremlin is insisting the counter-assault has failed. Britain's Ministry of Defence say long-range precision strikes do continue to disrupt Russia's resupply efforts. The UN Secretary-General is warning that Pakistan is facing a monsoon on steroids after catastrophic flooding has killed over 1,100 people. Antonio Guterres is urging the world to help as he launched a $160 million appeal. He said funds raised would provide over 5 million people with water, food, sanitation and health support. More than 33 million people have been affected by flooding in the country. The direct train service between London and Disneyland Paris will be cut next year. Eurostar announced that the route will be suspended from early June, saying it's focusing on its core routes like London to Paris and London to Brussels. The company added it's still recovering from the impact of the pandemic and uncertainty over European Union plans to tighten entry rules. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's go to the briefing with Darren.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. It is, almost 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. We're on TV, online, and of course on your DAB digital radio as well. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Well, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, yes, he is still Prime Minister, was back on duty today for the last week of his premiership. He spoke a bit earlier to reporters where he was quizzed on what next might be happen in order to try and get families across the country to deal with the rising bills that we're expecting this coming winter, particularly when it comes to energy, but also to food costs as well. But he was also quizzed on the progress of one of his key campaign promises, that was trying to level up the country. Let's have a listen in to Boris Johnson.
Effort of companies up and down the country, but particularly here in North Dorset, where what they're doing is putting in gigabit broadband at an incredible pace, and they're doing it with government support. I think we put about 5 billion into it when I first got in. When I first became Prime Minister, only 7% of the premises of this country had gigabit broadband. That's now up to 70%. And if you can put it into remote rural communities, what you're going to do is level up. You're going to give people opportunities that they wouldn't have had before. You're going to give them ability to connect in a way that was completely unimaginable before. And that enables businesses to thrive and prosper in remote areas. It means that people can stay where they grew up. They don't have to go to live in towns or cities. And it is absolutely transformational. Now, the problem with gigabit is it's been restricted to areas like cities where it's easy to put in, and what we're seeing now is the driving out of gigabit communications across the countryside, and that will deliver the basic fundamentals for prosperity and growth for decades to come. And so we're putting in stuff like that, and it's in addition to all the things that we're doing with high-speed rail and all the rest of it.
Away from staying connected to the internet, of course, a lot of people want an update on the cost of living crisis, staying connected to electricity and power and so forth. You said at the weekend that huge support is on from whoever your successor is going to be in less than a week.
Yes.
But what people have lacked over the summer is they're really worrying about the rising cost of these bills, these scary bills coming, is the detail. So is it an opportunity now, Prime Minister?
Yeah, let me go
some detail of what the next package of support will be.
Of course, let me go over what's coming up, because I think people,
not what's already announced, but the next.
I think what people need to know is what's coming up in the next few months. And so it's very important to remember that there's £1,200 going to 8 million vulnerable households. In October, you're going to get £400 going to virtually everybody. That's 29 million households will get £400. In November, every pensioner is going to get £300 pounds to help with the cost of energy. Plus, everybody who's entitled to disability benefit is going to get £150. Now, all that is on top of what we're doing with increasing the living wage, increasing support through universal credit.
But you promised at the weekend, Prime Minister, I must just ask, because you promised at the weekend the extra support, and on top of all those billions of pounds, which is fantastic, but we've known about that for weeks now. Are you aware of, for instance, what Liz Truss's economic plan is? Rishi Sunak's camp saying that she hasn't got one. We were hoping to hear tonight in an interview which she pulled out from. Do you know what her economic plan might be?
Yeah, look, let me give you the figures. So it's a huge amount coming, already come, £650 already come, a lot more to come. What the government is also going to do, whichever of the two candidates gets in next week, what the government is also going to do is provide a further package of support for helping people with the cost of energy. What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year, and that's because of Putin's war in Ukraine. Being absolutely no doubt, the gas prices, gas, is being driven by what Putin did in Ukraine. But we're going to get through it. This year, I'll give you a statistic. We're taking 26% more of our own gas from the North Sea than we did last year. We're much less dependent on Putin's supplies. June this year took zero fuel from Russia for the first time in decades. And at the same time, what we're doing, and I just want to give people a sense of hope and perspective, because the crucial thing, in addition to the cash that we're putting in, and don't forget, we can put the cash in because we're in a strong economic position. Basically, we have very low unemployment. We have the reserves because we came out of COVID.
Let's just quickly move on, because I know you've not got very much time.
I'm just going to complete one point.
Very quick.
Very, very important, because people do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week, and we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
3 more questions.
Yes.
Let me ask about Pakistan. Obviously, we've seen these devastating floods there. Will the UK be sending a package of aid to Pakistan?
Yes, of course, and I can tell you that our sympathies are very much with the people of Pakistan, and we've seen the devastation there, and it's absolutely heartrending that Pakistan is traditionally one of the biggest recipients of UK overseas aid. We will, of course, make sure that we send a fitting package commensurate with the vital relationship that there is between the UK and Pakistan, and people's natural sympathies with those who have been affected by the floods.
This might be the last time we see you as Prime Minister in a high-vis, and we also want to talk about sort of legacy, and there's been a lot of chat over the weekend about a comeback potentially. Are you going to go to the back benches? Are you going to get out of politics? What's your plan after next Tuesday?
No, I'm concentrating on today, and today is a great day for me. A very exciting day. When I became one of the reasons, one of my theme tunes when I was campaigning to be leader of the Conservative Party, when I was campaigning to become Prime Minister 3 or 4 years ago, it was all about gigabit broadband, because I know how important it is.
We've had a lot of gigabit broadband. I've already been tapped on the shoulder, Prime Minister. Will you rule out a comeback at all?
I want to talk to you about.
But will you? We've had a big chunky question on the fantastic rural broadband. Will you rule out a comeback, Prime Minister?
People are far more interested, in my view. I humbly submit to you. Okay, you can disagree if you like, but I think, on the whole, people in this country are more interested in their gigabit broadband than they are in the fate of this or that politician.
There you go, Prime Minister speaking a little bit earlier on. Prime Minister for less than a week now. GBNews at gbnews.uk. Let's bring in Tom Howard, our political correspondent, who is live in Westminster for us this afternoon. Tom, I noticed on your Instagram feed a little bit earlier on today, they're already building the stands in Downing Street in preparation for next week for all the photographers there. But we're in this, and we continue to be in this weird period where, you know, lots of people are asking for the government to do something on the cost of living crisis. You've got the current Prime Minister saying he can't really do anything because he's not allowed to, and the incoming potential Prime Minister saying that she doesn't quite know what she can do because she needs to talk to officials.
Yes, it's all a bit murky, isn't it? The Prime Minister pointing there to all of the support that has already been announced, the £37 billion of spending that now looks like it will pale in comparison to the scale of the crisis. It really does show just how deep into the squalls we have sailed in this crisis. Without enough energy generation of our own, the whole of Western Europe so reliant on Russia's gas that's now been slowly turned off. And that means, of course, that although the United Kingdom gets less than 5% of its energy from Russia in terms of gas, we are still competing with all those other European countries that want to get their gas from Norway, that want to get their gas from the North Sea, that want to get their gas from Qatar, or want to get it from the United States of America. Frankly, Russia pulling out means that everyone needs to get it from everywhere else, and there isn't enough supply to go around, hence those price rises, hence this crisis. But yes, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak fairly vague on what they would do, wanting to get over that hurdle of becoming Prime Minister before we see the fully fleshed plans of theirs. Indeed, we have heard from the Treasury that they've worked up potential plans for the next Prime Minister to take up from the word go, but clearly there's this sense of frustration that this Conservative leadership race has dragged on for many more weeks when the conclusion has seemed fairly certain for quite some time now. It does seem like the new incoming government will have to act incredibly quickly in the only 3 weeks that they have before conference recess kicks in at the end of September. It's a very short window, but interesting there, listening to the outgoing Prime Minister. We heard for the first time confirmation from him that he wants to say something on nuclear power later this week. There was a rumour that we would get some sort of speech, some sort of announcement from the Prime Minister, perhaps approving Sizewell C and moving forward with that nuclear project. We know that so many nuclear power plants are coming offline over the next few years in this country, creating a big crisis. This government's tried to be more pro-nuclear, but it's been very slow. There's a bit of a contentious idea as to whether this should be a decision for the outgoing Prime Minister after he's announced his resignation, but clearly it does look now more likely than not that Sizewell C will be approved by the Prime Minister in a speech later this week.
And all this, of course, Tom, while we still await to find out who the winner is going to be. There is a final hustings, isn't there, tomorrow night in London. And then the voting closes on Friday, with the announcements, I think, on Monday.
That's the timeline to a point, yes. Tomorrow night at the Excel Centre in London, there'll be the final regional hustings. Of course, the Conservative Party's gone round all 12 official regions of the United Kingdom, the final one being London. This is the last opportunity that both candidates will be in the same room, not together, but sequentially, setting out their case and taking those questions. Of course, we do know that Liz Truss has pulled out of a proposed BBC interview as well, but given where we are in the stage of the contest that we are at, it is very unlikely that anything now can move the needle. Most Conservatives have voted by this point. It really is a waiting game, and yes, of course, the vote closes on Friday, the counting over the weekend, and midday on Monday is when we hear that result.
Indeed, I will have full coverage, of course, here on GB News. Tom, as always, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Horwood, there joining us live from Westminster. Going to take a quick break, though, here on GB News. Do stay tuned. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be focusing on that Afghan withdrawal. It is a year on since US, and indeed to a degree UK forces finally pulled out of Afghanistan. What have been the consequences? What have been the regrets, the mistakes, and what does the future hold for that country? We'll be talking about that and so much more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Very welcome back. Now, it's been a year to the day since the West withdrew from Afghanistan. A senior military analyst has told GB News that the world is much less safe because of that decision, and that authoritarian leaders have been emboldened. As well as living under Taliban rule, the people of Afghanistan have been hit by a devastating economic crisis, with around half the population facing the threat of starvation. Our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, has this report.
12 months on from the chaos and the carnage of a sudden, badly managed withdrawal, Afghanistan has all but disappeared from our nightly news bulletins. Yet right across this country, they're living with the consequences of a decision made a world away in Washington. Here in the capital and elsewhere, the queues at the UN's World Food Programme feeding stations are constant. Afghans who just a year earlier held down respectable jobs, now forced to beg for handouts.
My husband was martyred the day the Taliban came to power a year ago. We had some savings from his service to the Afghan army over the last 15 years. Now all that is finished.
People cannot afford things from my shop now. There's no business for people.
The sanctions have had a huge impact on our businesses. The Afghan assets frozen by America are essential for food security and the value of our currency.
The United Nations has described the situation here as the world's largest humanitarian disaster, with over half the population facing the threat of starvation. It is the outcome many had feared, that they'd warned would follow from the decision by US President Joe Biden to exit Afghanistan 2 decades after coalition forces first entered this country. The Taliban took full advantage, and as they rolled towards and then into the capital, panicked Afghans, many who'd worked for the government and coalition forces, scrambled to get out. At Kabul airport, US, British and other troops tried their best to manage the withdrawal, but increasingly desperate locals broke through the airport's perimeter. In horrifying scenes, some jumped onto one departing US aircraft, only to plunge to their deaths as it gathered speed and took off. As the world watched, President Biden doubled down on his decision to pull out.
I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit.
Just days before the end of the pullout, in the huge sewage canal alongside the airport, where thousands had been queuing, a suicide bomb attack by the Islamic State. 13 members of the US military were among the more than 180 killed. Right across the political spectrum, in the US and beyond, President Biden's handling of the Afghan withdrawal has been widely criticised, branded a low point in America's standing in the world. Many analysts believe it simply emboldened autocrats like Vladimir Putin.
The message that our withdrawal sent to the world, which I believe helped encourage President Putin to invade Ukraine. I think the reduction in US international credibility and reliability, I think, has made the world much, much less safe.
In the year since the pullout, the UK has taken more than 20,000 Afghans as part of the resettlement programme, but many more remain trapped in country and unable to leave. Throughout Afghanistan, Taliban promises they've changed, that women could continue to work and girls would get a full education, have fallen way short. On the security side, fears remain that extremist groups will continue to take hold here. One Western documentary maker who spent a significant amount of time with the Taliban has documented their continued fight against Islamic State. It's one extremist group he says the Taliban seem determined to confront.
The strong part of the Taliban is actually security. They have been fighting Islamic State for 6 years now. So that's the thing they can do. And they are not doing this to satisfy the Western audiences. They are doing this because they want the Islamic State eliminated in Afghanistan.
But last month's US drone strike, which targeted and killed the al-Qaeda leader in Afghanistan, highlights the continued security concerns here. Ayman al-Zawahiri had been living in a property in Kabul, reportedly owned by a top aide to a Taliban government official. 12 months on from the Western withdrawal here, the Taliban may be celebrating, but the extremist threat remains. The humanitarian crisis is worsening, and the freedoms spoken of by the new government are yet another false promise to the long-suffering people of this beautiful but troubled nation. Mark White, GB News.
Mark White reporting there. Well, let's bring in Major General Chip Chapman, who joins us down the line and did serve in Afghanistan. Chip, very good afternoon to you. Just first of all, your reflection on those events a year ago.
Well, we left the Taliban in possession of the battlefield, so that looks like a strategic defeat, and indeed it was. And we were all culpable for that. But I think we have to also remember what the US strategic objective was, and it always was in terms of al-Qaeda, to prevent catastrophic attacks on the US mainland. And you didn't need a counter-terrorist protecting the homeland presence forevermore there with a permanent garrison. It's not 2001 anymore. There's Department of Homeland Security, there's the TSA, the Sky Marshals, there's data as the new oil with artificial intelligence and machine learning, airport security. There was no need to have a forever war there. I agree that it may have emboldened people, but let's be clear, all those strategic objectives are still the case. There is no international terrorism emanating internationally from Afghanistan in the West at the moment. And indeed, the month before the withdrawal, that's exactly what CIA Director Burns and Avril Haines from the Directorate of National Intelligence in America both said that there is no longer a major danger of transnational terrorism to the West from Afghanistan. The Taliban were never transnational terrorists. They were always sort of more to the ethnic homeland as Pashtun nationalists. That is different than Al-Qaeda, but Al-Qaeda and IS and ISK as well are no longer the threats they were in 2014, 2015, and the years before that, after 2001.
So the bottom line being, Chip, that essentially you feel that the decision was the right decision, even if it was badly handled.
Yeah, and you have to remember it was actually a bipartisan decision originally. The Doha Agreement was actually negotiated under a Trump administration. The only thing then was the timing of the thing. The original withdrawal was going to be in April 22. It was extended to August 22, which gave people another 4 months to get their ducks in a row. Now, if this had been vital national interest, every other nation in the world could have said, we will stay there. Would that have helped the Afghan security forces? I don't think it would, because the thing which always stuck with me was General Nicholson was the head of Resolute Support. And you have to remember that from December 2014, NATO forces, the UK, US, were not involved in combat operations anymore. It was merely a training and support mission. And he said in June 2018 that Afghan security forces were providing the power, NATO was providing the training and support, and the Afghan people were providing the will. It turned out that the Afghan people and the Afghan security forces were neither providing the power and the will, and that is the essential big difference between what is going on in Ukraine, where there it is a nation fighting a war in the way that in Afghanistan it was not.
What's the future, though, for Afghanistan, Chip? Clearly, as you say, there's not going to be direct Western involvement anytime soon. The Taliban are most definitely in charge. It still, though, is a place that is incredibly difficult in terms of levels of poverty, starvation, rights for women, and so on. Are we simply essentially seeing Afghanistan slip into the Afghanistan that existed pre-2001?
Yeah, it's a period of sullen repression when, any notion of girls going to school, human rights, major poverty, that's all true. And, we often respond emotionally to that, and we should, because they're terrible images. But any spillage and spillover from terrorism at the moment from Afghanistan is to do with the groups in Afghanistan which threaten the countries around the periphery of Afghanistan. So to the north, you've got the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, threatening Uzbekistan. China, very worried because of a group called ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic movement. And indeed, there was an attack in Kunduz last October by Al-Uyghur, and that's the Uyghurs, and the Chinese are fearful of that. And of course, they border part of Afghanistan. But more importantly, it's the Pakistan and India with a whole kaleidoscope of groups who are the transnational groups to be fearful of, such as the TTP, that's Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, ISK, as we already know, a group called Jaish-e-Mohammed, and from an Indian perspective, Lashkar-e-Toiba. So there are lots of groups there, but all these groups thrive, as they always have, when you have fragile and failing states. That's the same in Pakistan. It's the same in Afghanistan. Now, in 2000, after the Taliban took control, only 3 nations recognized them. At the moment, no nation recognizes the Taliban administration, Taliban 2.0, and won't. And that's what gives us potentially the leverage in the future over the Taliban administration at the moment.
OK, Chip Chapman, as always, really appreciate your time and your analysis this afternoon, live there from Salisbury. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You're watching GB News, coming up between now and 4, looking at 2 great British institutions under threat, fish and chips, and the great British booze at the pub because of the cost of living crisis. All that and much more, but first, here's the latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister says people will face tough months ahead due to the soaring cost of living. During a visit in Dorset today, Boris Johnson promised more announcements would come this week on energy security, including nuclear power. But he said it will be up to his successor, either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, to provide a further package of support.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. The Labour Party says the delay is causing families unnecessary worry. But the Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard the full advice, which she won't have until and if she's appointed as PM. The whole of the southwest of England is now in drought following some of the driest conditions in nearly 90 years. The Environment Agency says Bristol, Somerset, Dorset, South Gloucestershire and parts of Wiltshire have all now moved to drought status. It means that 11 of the 14 Environment Agency areas in England are now affected. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.167 and €1.166. The price of gold currently stands at £1,482.40 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. It is 21 minutes to 4 o'clock on TV, online, and of course on your digital radios as well. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, if you treated yourself to some fish and chips over the weekend, I must say, I had some for lunch, very nice, you might have noticed a pretty significant price hike. Yes, because the soaring cost of cod, sunflower oil and energy has left many local chippies struggling for survival. The National Federation of Fish Fryers has warned that even our iconic fish and chips could be a thing of the past. Well, our South West reporter, Jeff Moody, has been finding out more.
A British bank holiday weekend. Fish and chips, salt and vinegar, mushy peas, curry sauce. Our chippy teas are as British as Yorkshire pudding.
It's always been a thing. When you go to the seaside, you have your rock, you have your fish and chips, you can hear the seagulls.
Yeah, but it was always better in newspaper. Years ago, when I was growing up, it was a poor man's meal. Now, just bought 2 lots of fish and chips, 23 quid.
But why is our erstwhile national dish now so expensive?
The fish prices have gone up extortionately. The oil prices have gone up extortionately, and everything across the whole spectrum that we sell have gone up extortionately. So we're finding it a struggle to keep our prices reasonable and competitive.
I mean, it's all right for me to go in there and get one portion for myself, but that was £11 just for one person.
It's a lot of money, isn't it?
So can you imagine, you know, you've got a group of 5 or 6, that's probably more expensive than going to a restaurant.
The National Federation of Fish Fryers believes the industry could be on the verge of extinction. They've been pressing for help from the government.
At the moment, we've got VAT at 20%. I think that needs reducing down to 5% at the most, just like during the COVID pandemic. Other than that, we need a long-term strategy for hospitality. I think there needs to be a plan that sees beyond any leadership elections or general elections, something that will take us a view to 10 years in the future, so we can build a strong hospitality sector. It's not just fish and chips, it's the entire sector.
Next week, a new Prime Minister takes the helm in Westminster with the biggest inbox ever seen in peacetime. Add to that list, saving the humble chippy. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, it's not just fish and chips that are struggling due to the cost of energy and food prices, but also elsewhere in the hospitality industry, the Great British Boozer, the pub, is also under threat. Let's speak to a pub owner, Kate Stewart, who joins us down the line. Kate, very good afternoon to you. We're just talking there, weren't we, about fish and chip shops struggling, but pubs are facing a pretty difficult autumn and winter too, and that's because primarily energy prices are going through the roof.
Well, we've faced really tough times over COVID. I feel like the hospitality sector was obliterated during that time. We're just getting back together. We're just getting our businesses back, and boom, energy increased costs. It's absolutely atrocious.
Say a sense, if you can, Kate, what it means for you. I see you seem to be in your pub this afternoon. What are we talking about here? How high are those bills going up? How unsustainable could it become?
Well, completely unsustainable. I mean, the hospitality sector gets hit for everything. We're on 20% VAT. We have to pay 20% out of every pound that comes over the bar, in addition to our VAT. Then we can't pass the costs on to our customers because they won't pay it. They haven't got it. So people will go to the cheapest one and try and find the cheapest one. You know, it's just getting to the point where a community pub will be a thing of the past. It's supposed to be the hub of a community. Now, my complex is in the middle of a really deprived area in Liverpool, and I'm already planning on opening the doors to let people come in over the winter to get warm and have light, and for children to do their homework and stuff, because that's how bad it's getting.
And this is a reminder, isn't it, as you say, Kate, about the pub is not just somewhere where, you know, people go to have a pint or two, but it has traditionally been at the heart of communities up and down the country.
Pubs go back to the start of the times. I mean, they've been here forever. People congregate in pubs together, socialise. It's just a massive part of the British culture. I mean, it is going to go into extinction. More help is needed. You know, everyone down at Westminster, you do nothing. It doesn't matter who's in power. We will still be in this absolute terrible position. You know, the price of the energy has gone up because someone's decided it has. These energy companies are reporting billions and billions of pounds worth of profit. Well, why are we paying so much more for it? It's an absolute joke shop, yet again.
It is a joke shop in many regards. What would you say then to Liz Truss, who probably will be Prime Minister this time next week if she's watching this programme? What would you say to her? What would you like her to do to help save your business and many others?
Don't be as useless as Boris. If you're going to go in and do the job, do it properly. Help the people who need it. Help the working class. Help businesses that are struggling. Do a job that leads the people, that helps the people. Don't just sit in Westminster and waste all the money on contracts with your mates. Let's help the people who need it, and let's get this country back on the road.
And Sam, just very finally, how concerned are you that you might struggle this winter, that it might get too much, that you might not be able to keep your pub open?
So I'm in a little bit of a different position. So I'm a Liverpool FC pub where I'm next to the ground. So we do have a lot of traffic and we are just open match days. But your small community pubs, normal ones, they're going to be gone. They're going to be extinct. I'd ask people to go out, support them. Let's all come together. Let's have social responsibility, help each other out and build our communities back together, because you will not have one. There will be no place for you to go anymore.
Sam, really appreciate your time this afternoon. As you say, let's hope the government are listening and take action at some point. Thank you so much indeed for joining us there from Liverpool.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have a pint on us. Thanks, Sam. Let's move on now and talk about issues further afield, and that is in Ukraine, because the long-awaited counter-offensive to seize Kherson has begun. It marked a significant step forward in Kyiv's campaign to try and retake some of the Russian-held territory that they have held in the south of the country, really since the start of the war. So far, Ukrainian troops have mounted a counter-offensive, have broken through Russian defences in several sectors on the front line of the city, and Ukraine has been shelling the ferries that Moscow is using to supply some of the weapons into that territory on the Dnipro River. Well, let's bring in the former British Army officer, Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, who joins us down the line. Hamish, as always, thank you. Just give us a sense, a reminder again, just where Kherson is and how important it is, and the very fact that it's been in Russian hands really since March.
Good afternoon, Darren. Yeah, Kherson is down in the south. It's absolutely a key strategic position just north of the Crimea, just to the west of Zaporizhzhia, which we've heard so much about, the nuclear power station. And the news coming out today is positive. I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. There's an awful lot of disinformation going around at the moment. But hopefully this is a big psychological point for the Ukraine people. They've been fighting for their lives, defending for the last 6 months. Now they're on the back foot, now they're on the front foot. And hopefully going forward, they seem to be having some success, but attacking is more challenging. And the combined arms maneuver, that's the use of tanks and artillery and aircraft to fight, is a challenge, and the training has not been that long. But on the back of that as well, we hear that the Russian high command is in disarray. The defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, who was running things, has disappeared. It would appear that Putin is speaking directly to commanders on the ground. You know, this shows something or an organization in disarray. So I think it's a long way to go still, but very positive. And it would appear that the sophisticated Western weaponry, the HIMARS and the MRLS, is really having a huge impact on this war, combined with the Western intelligence, which is providing, no doubt, the accurate grids and positions of those key places that the Ukrainians need to attack, like the ammunition dumps and the bridges that you mentioned earlier.
And Hamish, how are Russia likely to react to this, or are they going to be able to react to this? Are they somewhat impotent in that sense? You know, are we likely to see a change of direction here from the Russians to try and counter that counterattack? Or are they just going to have to sit back and take it?
Well, I think we're in a challenging position, Darren, because we know that they have already repositioned a whole bunch of troops from the Donbass region to try and prop this up, because if Kherson goes, it's not very far into the Crimea. You know, if the Russians lost Crimea, having taken it in 2014, you know, that would almost be strategic defeat for the Russians and the end of Putin. But they appear to be in disarray and, you know, conventionally not doing well. Of course, we're hugely concerned with the nuclear power station Zaporizhzhia, which is, you know, only 100 so kilometers away from here, which Putin is using as his ace card, almost as a improvised nuclear weapon. But we understand that the international inspectors are in Kyiv now, and hopefully they will be in Zaporizhzhia very soon to hopefully find out exactly what the position is in Zaporizhzhia, and with international inspectors there, hopefully secure that site. But we're hearing from the Ukraine government that Russia is bombing those corridors that the international inspectors would use. So we shall see. So not a great clear answer to your question, Darren. We just don't know. There's not much more conventional force that the Russians can throw at this. They're running out of manpower and women power, who they're chucking in increasing numbers untrained. And hopefully this will bring Putin to the negotiation table for peace, because escalating it beyond conventional weapons is something that we all want to avoid at virtually all costs.
Indeed. Hamish, as always, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, Hamish, Direct and Gordon there. Join us down the line with the latest on the situation on the ground there in Ukraine. Let's go finally north of the border, because a long-awaited clean-up has finally commenced after rubbish was being removed from the streets of Edinburgh. So the first round of the council bin strikes came to an end. Bin men and cleaners, look at that, walks out on the 18th of August in protest over pay. They are back on the streets, got a pretty big job to do though, because over the last week and a half, huge piles of rubbish have accumulated in many streets in the Scottish capital. However, despite that clean-up, unsurprisingly, the council is saying it's expecting things will take a little while to return to normal for some residents who may not have the rubbish collected before the next strike is due to start. Well, let's speak to the political editor of the Scottish Daily Mail. That is Michael Blackley, who joins us down the line. Michael, first of all, I'm sure there's much relief that the rubbish on the ground is finally being cleared. How bad did it get? The images look pretty horrific from down here.
Yes, it was pretty horrible walking through the streets of Edinburgh in particular in recent days. It's the annual festival season that's been going on, where the city is really besieged by visitors. So it's the worst possible time from the perspective of residents and visitors for this to be happening. The rubbish really has piled up. Some of the big beauty spots of the city have looked pretty terrible in recent days. And it's not just Edinburgh. While that action has finished for now in Edinburgh, in other cities it's continuing. It comes to an end for a period tomorrow, but there's more action on the way next week. And it's not just going to be bins that are affected, it's also going to be schools. There's going to be mass school closures because the unions are lining up more strike action.
And you talk about that strike action. That is because I assume there's been no movement or little movement on kind of pay and conditions. We're looking at a pretty potential protracted autumn, I should say, of more and more strike action.
Yes, I think for some time now we've been talking about the prospect of this being a winter of discontent, and that really does seem to be on the way after things in summer haven't exactly been that good either. There was some hope yesterday that a new pay offer on the table might actually break the deadlock. In the end, it didn't do so. The unions weren't happy. It doesn't seem like the pay offer is necessarily a long way off. It sounds like there's a little bit of adjustment needed. So the Scottish councils, the council umbrella group COSLA, did offer a 5% pay rise with a commitment that people would get a minimum of an extra £1,925. However, from the union's perspective, it's not the £1,925 they're concerned about, it's the way it's being paid. So if your 5% pay rise isn't 1,925, then the councils will make up the difference through a one-off payment. But the unions are pretty concerned that that's a worse deal than council workers in other parts of the UK and England and Wales, because they're simply getting a salary rise of £1,925. So they're not happy at all that workers in Scotland seem to be getting a worse deal than workers in the rest of the UK.
OK, and just very finally and quickly, Michael, if you can, Liz Truss almost certainly likely to be the UK Prime Minister this time next week. What's the view of her in Scotland from a part of the country, it must be said, that wasn't terribly enamoured with Boris Johnson?
Well, I think Liz Truss has been having an interesting campaign in terms of Scotland because she has wanted to talk about the Union quite a lot. She's also wanted to show that she can stand up to Nicola Sturgeon and that she won't let her have an easy time. That's been the message to Conservative members. Scottish Conservative membership generally have lapped that up, I would say. They're pretty excited about the fact that we'll have a Prime Minister who's not scared to say what they think about the Scottish Government, not scared to criticise it. You won't be surprised at all to hear, though, that it won't probably win her many new votes from SNP or potentially Labour voters in Scotland, who really maybe Labour in particular thinking that the way to approach the Scottish Government is to try and work with them a little bit more, to try and move on from the issues of independence if you can. I don't think that's what we're going to see. I think what we're going to see is a really confrontational battle over issues of independence and the Union, which we're rather used to here in Scotland.
Indeed. OK, Michael, as always, thank you. Michael Blackley there from Edinburgh and the Scottish Daily Mail. That is it from me for today. Thomas back at 9:30 in the morning. Gloria at 12. I'll be back at 3. Up next, though, it is Colin Brazier between 4 and 6. Stay tuned for that. We'll leave you, though, with the weather from the Met Office. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice afternoon.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine afternoon for most of us. Some sunshine out there, but a lot of cloud at the same time, and a few showers in one or two spots. But for most, it's dry and it's fine because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That's where it's sitting. Tightly packed isobars, relatively speaking, further south mean that it is a blustery afternoon, especially around the English Channel coast. But that wind will break up the cloud overnight and we'll see lengthy clear spells. The showers will mostly ease away as well, but one or two could continue to